Sorry, I have not turned this on. The reason for this is that we have several items which will probably go into exempt, and I don't want to keep going in and out of exempt with every other item. So what I'm trying to do is I'm taking what is on our agenda papers for 8, 9, 10 and 11 to be placed at the end of the meeting. And we will try and do as much as we can in open session for those items, and then we'll go into exempt and we'll do them in closed session because there is so much exempt material. And then at the very end of the meeting, we'll come out of exempt and consider any recommendations that we may or may not wish to make. I hope that that's okay. Is everybody okay with that? Okay, right. Thank you very much indeed. So before we go any further, let's just introduce ourselves. If we can introduce members of the committee first, if we could start with you, Peter.
Thank you. I'm Peter Nicholson. I'm the member for Haslemere East.
Terry Weldon, also Haslemere East.
Janet Crowe, Farncombe and Cattershall.
Andy MacLeod, Farnham Moor Park.
Jerome Davidson from Hindhead, Haslemere.
Michaela Wicks, Hale and Heath End.
Lauren Atkins, Bramley and Monash.
Zoe Barker Lomax, Haslemere East.
Thank you. We have a number of portfolio holders in the room. I wonder if they might just identify themselves, please, starting with Steve.
Steve Williams, portfolio holder for Environment and Sustainability.
Liz Townsend, portfolio holder for Economic Development, Regeneration and Planning.
Mark Merriweather, Farnham Moor Park and portfolio holders for Finance and Assets.
Thank you. We have two members, guests, and I've got one or two on the screen as well. So, John, do you want to just start?
Yes, good evening. Councillor Rabini, representing Haslemere.
Good evening, Councillor Julian Spence, representing Hindhead and Beacon Hill.
Thank you. On the screen, I think we have Jerry Hyman, is that right?
Yes, Councillor Jerry Hyman. I'm going to actually have to leave the meeting now anyway, so if you can scrub me from the indications to speak that I've got, but I will try and join later during the exempt sessions if I can get back to my machine. Okay.
Okay,
cheers.
thank you. And I think we may have Carol Coburn joining us at some point.
I do indeed, Chair. I'm here.
Oh, you're there. Right. Sorry, I couldn't see you on the screen. Fine. Thank you, Carol. Right, we have a number of officers with us. I wonder if we could perhaps start with Richard to my left, and then we can go around to the rest of the officers we have with us.
Yes, good evening, members. I'm Richard Bates, the Strategic Director of Finance.
Hi, I'm Debbie Smith, Development Programme Manager.
Good evening, I'm Abby Lewis. I'm the Executive Head of Regeneration Planning Policy.
Evening, my name is John Percy. I'm a partner at Montague Evans Advisors to the Council.
Candice Keats, Senior Accountant for HRA and Capital.
Louisa Blundell, Waverley Borough Council Housing Development Manager.
Robin Taylor, Executive Head of Organisational Development.
Delma Bryant, Sustainability Manager.
Thomas Lancaster, Sustainable Transport Officer.
And Jenny Sturgis, Policy and Performance Officer.
Right, very good. Thank you very much indeed. Right, let us move on apace, if we may. Apologies for absence and substitutes. I don't think we have any.
No, Chair, none received.
The minutes of the last meeting, pages 7 to 16, might I have your approval or agreement to those minutes as a reliable and a good record of the meeting? Okay, thank you. Item 4, questions from members of the public. Have we any?
None received, Chair.
Okay, questions from members?
None received.
Okay, fine. So let's go on to item 6, which is working groups. Councillor Barker Lomax, would you like to bring us up to speed with your workforce profile subgroup? Want to turn your microphone on.
Thank you. Layla's going to put some slides up. Don't worry, it's really short. Okay, here we go. Right, so sorry, could we go up a couple of slides, please? And up, and down one. Thank you. Right, here we go. So the purpose of this working group was to gain greater granularity for our O&S Resources group within the reports insofar as they related to workforce. And we had 7 members, so 3 councillors and 4 officers, as you can see up there, Peter, Jerome and me, and John, Robin, Jake and Layla. Next slide, please. I'm going to rattle through because we've got 400 pages to get through. So what we have already achieved, with huge thanks to John and Robin, is we already have greater granularity, exactly as the committee had asked for. So what we have is a greater granularity of breakdown by department and a rolling 12 months quarterly review in each report. Benchmarking is now available, both against our 11 local district authorities in Surrey and compared to target. And we have a direction of target summary with commentary from HR. So things look, in my mind, fantastic. I'm absolutely delighted with the work that the team has done. Next slide, please. Same again with staff absence. Again, we've got breakdown by department, 12-month in Rowley, and then benchmarking available compared to the Surrey district authorities and compared with our own targets. Again, direction of target and additional commentary from HR. So, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we're already at best practice, which is terrific. Next slide, please. And then in terms of next steps, I don't think we need to take this a huge lot further, to be honest, but what we did want to do next was to look at overall age profiles so that we can see whether there are any patterns that we can mitigate risks, for example. Recruitment gaps, wanted to look at those. You know, I personally want to look at the cost of agencies and whether we're missing a trick there, frankly, and then ratio of employees to contractors. I think, I'm not sure who on the committee had asked for this, but we wanted a monthly report on the number of contractors and gaps at the end of each month. And then we wanted to do a case study on the recent growth bids in the HRA workforce. And I think that is going to be interesting for us because that might be, once we've set up the case studies, something that we can then use moving forwards for future growth bids. And I think that's it, other than a huge thank you to the team, John and Robin. Thank you. Any questions, I suppose? Or
Any
maybe not
questions,
tonight.
ladies and gentlemen? If I, from the chair, could just say thank you.
Yes.
That's a great step forward. Could I just ask the timetable? When can we see that information on a regular basis?
I think the plan, Chairman, was to bring the first report to hopefully the next scrutiny committee and then from there see how often the committee wants it.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Right, well, I think our thanks to Zoe and the team for the work in doing that. I think that's a very significant step forward. Thank you. Okay. Any other items, Jake?
No, I think that was everything we had from Zoe's update there.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Then let's go on to item 7, which is the corporate performance report for 2024-25. Does Jenny, do you want to introduce this before I then take questions? I've lost track of you. Where are I? There you are, sorry.
So this is the report for quarter 3, which is October, November and December of 2023. There's nothing specific to highlight. I did receive the questions from yourself and from Councillor Atkins, which I do have some responses. I received them late this afternoon, so I'll forward those tomorrow morning in writing to you. The relevant heads of service aren't here this evening to answer those directly.
Okay, thank you. Shall we just go through and take it section by section, if we may? I'll use the small page numbers of the report rather than the large numbers of the agenda papers, if I may. We are looking at pages 4 to 35 of the. Maybe I'll stick to the agenda paper numbers. So page 4. If we go to the corporate dashboard, pages 4 to 12. Anybody's got any questions in that area they would like to raise? If I can, from the chair, just say that my concern here is that the overall number of KPIs, we seem to be a long way off target for a large number. If we look at the top of page 27, we've had 4 successive quarters now where we've had 35% in the red category, and it doesn't seem as if it's going to come down, which is a concerning. And then at 3.5, we have a substantial number of high complaint numbers, which I think is quite concerning. I don't know whether there's a quick answer that anybody wants to provide for that from officers. Jenny, is that what you're going to try and come back to me on?
Chair, I do have a written response in relation to the complaints. The overall KPIs, I think we would need to go section by section and see where the areas that are specifically red to gauge a picture as to why those KPIs are red.
Okay, I think my point is that it's a large number on a consistently high basis for a large time, for a long length of time. So that's a particular concern. If we go over the page to 3.61, page 28, I did ask for a breakdown of the staff turnover by department, by area. I was able to circulate that to you earlier this afternoon. I hope that you found that to be of interest. It identifies very clearly, and it really is using the information that Zoe's team were activating. And we note the fact that there are some disturbing areas in the planning area, which is very high. And I've lost the report now. Where is it? We have planning with a very high resignation turnover and total turnover. Assets and property are high, environmental services are high, and organizational development are high. And those are areas of real concern. And I think that's each of those areas is areas which we need to keep a careful eye upon. Are there any comments more generally on that, Jenny, that you would want to make?
Not specifically, Chair.
There are various other smaller items that I think we could wait for in terms of the response to my requests. So let's move on then to, the one point that I had was that on page 29, 3.7.1, the commentary there from our section 151 officer, Richard, is out of kilter with the actual numbers on the report. So I don't know whether there's a cut and paste job from last time that hasn't been updated. So Candice?
Yes, no, it's exactly that. The numbers in the table are correct and the narrative needs updating.
Okay, thank you. So if we move on, if we may, to the next section, which is page 34, which is assets and property, which goes through for a few pages. Has anybody got any concerns that they want to raise? We're now at little number, page 12 to page 16. Okay, I see no hands up. Let us move on then to page 38 or page 16 of the actual report, the communications and customer services. Any thoughts or questions in that area, please? If I can from the chair, I have a concern on page 39 as regards complaints. And it 5.2 with the number of complaints that for 4 quarters now have been running at a very high level. That's a concern. I read in the text that corporately we've completed training for service complaint administrators and regular reminder emails being sent. And there's talk of key staff being on leave and work pressures. I think that this is quite a concern. It says we're expecting to do better in Q4. Is there any sign that we're going to be doing better in Q4, which we're now mostly through, are we not? Jenny, is anybody who can answer that?
I'm not sure of Q4, what the statistics are like at the moment. We only get those at the end of the quarter, but I do have a response from the executive head of communications and customer services, if you'd like me to either email that or read it out for you.
Could email me that and copy the rest of the committee. That will be very helpful. Zoe.
Just briefly, I ran a quick analysis, and it seems to me that all departments that have over 5 complaints per quarter are really not meeting any response rate targets. And I just wondered whether we should just do a quick review of processes to see if we could just speed things up. I think it might just come down to process, just get the flow through.
Okay.
I don't really work in that department, Chair, so I can't really comment on the processes. I do believe that the complaints specifically in Q3 are related to a couple of specific service areas, and for example, assets and property only had 1 complaint which was not responded to on time, which gave them an overall response rate of 0%. The reason the response wasn't on time was because they needed legal input. So that does skew the information quite significantly. That's just one example. Obviously, in planning, they had a turnover of staff at the beginning of Q3, and the staff during Q3, needed time to familiarize themselves with the processes. So it's hopeful that the performance will improve in Q4.
Okay, I hear what you say. I think my concern is that we tend to hear a reply like that on most quarters in relation to what we've just been discussing. Certainly on high levels of complaints, that's something like the reply that we've had for the last 4 or 5 quarters. So I believe that this committee may well wish to sort of say, look, we think that there's more to be done here. It's a very worrying area, but we'll come to that at the end. Richard.
Just to update members. So one of the things that we've been talking about as the management team is actually reshuffling how we work on a weekly basis. So 1 out of 4 of the corporate management team meetings going forwards will be performance focused. So I will pick up these particular points you've raised tonight at that first meeting, and we'll make sure that those things are brought forward for you.
I would greatly appreciate that. As I say, this is a continuing issue and it doesn't seem to be improving. So attention to that, I think, would be very welcome. Okay, Jerome.
Thank you, Chair. But I think there should be some recognition of the point which Zoe made, and also I think to what you were alluding to as Chair, that there seems to be a lack of process definition and training. And I think that's what you picked up yourself as well. People are still having to learn on as they're doing the job. Also, if there's an action waiting on legal, somewhere, the chain is broken. And I think that really needs to be looked at more closely within that particular service area. And my sense is that will greatly help to reduce the number of delays in the performance.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on then to page 41. This is the service dashboard on finance. Are there any comments that anybody wants to make in that? No, I see nothing. I think I would just take note of the fact that our investment area or treasury area seems to be continuing to do rather well. And that will bail us out of any trouble for the finances for the end of this year, I think. So we thank them, I think, for all the work that they're doing. Okay, if we move on then to page 44, this is the dashboard area on housing services. Has anybody got any comments on that? Peter?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd refer to page 46 on the homelessness and housing options. I was pleased to see that there's 2 trainee officers have been appointed there. And it's good that we're playing our part in training apprenticeships. And I think this does need more emphasis for all organisations, and it has slipped in a number to some degree in recent years. And I noticed recently we also took on a legal trainee as well. So I like to see that momentum continuing, particularly on the apprenticeships.
Janet?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to look at, to refer to the box on page 47, which of course is mostly red. And on that I understand that the executive has set up a working group, an executive working group to do a deep dive into particularly the responsive repairs sections. And that's going to also include looking at voids and such things. And although I'm not on that executive working group, I am on the Landlord Services Advisory Board, I think that's what it's called. And that's coming, all that data is being looked at by that group as well. So I think really all I want to say is it looks awful, but everybody seems to be very aware that we need to be checking behind the figures and see what's really going on.
Zoe, did you have a comment on that?
Yes, I wanted to check. I seem to recall from a last meeting that we had a single contractor. Is that right?
Is that for the maintenance contract? Yes, Ian Williams.
Okay, so given that the KPIs are pretty poor on key areas, so satisfaction rates, response rates, time to do repairs, is it not time for us to get in a competing contractor, and then we make it clear to them to say, look, whoever does best on KPIs gets more business?
Not much I can say. I think it would need Hugh as head of housing. I guess I'd say there would be contractual impacts of doing that, but we'll feed it back to Hugh and ask for a response on that.
Thank you. I just wanted to come back on that, and I think that's part of what's being looked at by this working group. It's very conscious of the fact that the contractor, well, as I said, we need to look behind the figures and see what's really going on, and that includes the contract.
Okay, I think, again, from the chair, I think the H5A responsive repairs indicator has been an appalling position for quarter after quarter after quarter, and doesn't seem to be getting any better. Again, we hear each quarter that there's something happening and there's something happening, and we don't seem to see a result. So it's a very disappointing area, and I hope that Richard, you can take note of that. You must be looking at that, surely. It's an appalling position to continue on in this way, and I hope that that will be taken note of. And similarly, if we go to page 49, level 1 response rate, again on the complaints, is continuing to look very high and is way short of the 95% target. These are very worrying figures. Okay, if we then go on to page 51, which is the Legal and Democratic Services Service Dashboard. Anybody, any comments on that? I might just say from the chair that one of my questions was regarding 8.2.1, and I was quite concerned at the top of page 53 to look at the fourth line there, where we're told that the service has been affected by long-term sickness and on one of the 2 existing post holders and the resignation of another. And then in the final sentence of that paragraph, there is a risk of intervention from the Information Commissioner's officer, as well as reputational damage to the council. I think that's quite a worrying statement, which is coming from our head of Legal and Democratic Services. We did approve in the budget and a few months before that an increase in the number of people in that area. And I hope that with the increased staffing levels, that we can really get a grip of that. And I just wonder whether there's any comment. Richard, have you got any comment on that?
I will pick it up with Susan tomorrow and give you a response, Chairman.
Okay, and Jenny?
I do already have a written response to your question from Susan Sale. which I'll include in the email I forward to you in the morning.
Okay, thank you. I think when I see a statement like that from our legal head, that is, to me, quite worrying. I think then the only other area is where we look to organisational development, page 55 and page 56. Are there any comments that anybody wants to make there? No? Okay. Well, I think that will conclude our consideration of the Q3 corporate performance report. Could I just suggest that we just have a resolution that the committee notes with concern the continuing high staff turnover. We note with concern the high and continuing level of complaints, and we note with concern the continuing and high level of housing repairs, and request urgent action by the executive and the senior management team to resolve. Would that be something that the members of the committee would be happy to say yes to?
Yes.
Are we all agreed on that? So if we could include that as a recommendation, that would be appreciated. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Let's therefore conclude on that item and move, if we can, to item number 8, which is the Waverley LC whip adoption. We have, I think, Tom Lancaster with us, who is the Sustainable Transport Projects Officer. I'm a little concerned with this because this seems to me to be something which the other committee, chaired by Carol Coburn, the Services Committee, ought to look at, rather than us. But since this forms part of Robin Taylor's organisation, and Robin Taylor's organisation are scrutinised by this committee, it does come to us. But there are one or two members of the other committee with us, and I think Carol, as the chairman, is joining us as well, and they may wish to speak. So, Tom, would you like to introduce this? Thank you.
Yes, I'd like to apologise for maybe not having enough context in the report, which has led, I believe, to some misunderstandings. So local cycle and walking infrastructure plans, and these are defined by the Department for Transport, are defined as living documents. And as of 2021, the National Planning Framework has suggested they can be used to support sustainable transport policies, which is what Waverley would like to do. Waverley ended up with a slightly strange situation because of the Farnham infrastructure programme. We ended up with 2 local cycle and walking infrastructure plans. Surrey has been rolling these out, borough by district by borough. But because of the Farnham infrastructure programme, they got a dedicated local cycle and walking infrastructure plan. So we ended up with 2, and there were some slight differences in methods, which ideally should be resolved before we go to having sort of uniform approach across the borough for planning policy adoption. Over the last summer, the Farnham Local Cycle and Walking Infrastructure Plan, there was an initiative by the Surrey County councillors, including Councillor MacLeod, to review the prioritisation within the Farnham Local Cycle and Walking Infrastructure Plan, not the Waverley one, the Farnham one. And that led in October to pulling all that information together. An agreement was reached on reprioritisation. Following that, Surrey County Council Local Cycle and Walking Infrastructure team realised that they needed to do a maintenance update to the project because there was such a big change in the priorities that the published local cycle LC whip was just different from what had now been reprioritised from coming out from these workshops led by the county councillors. So that process started. This was an opportunity for Waverley to note some discrepancies and some changes, things that had happened on the ground that made the Farnham infrastructure plan out of date. And so we suggested some changes which were agreed with the LC whip team at Surrey. To be clear, none of these Waverley suggested updates affect all the work that was done and led by the Surrey County councillors. all of their priorities are completely unaffected. There is no relationship between the two, and no detrimental effect on the proposals that came out from the workshops led by the county councillors.
That to me is a bit confusing, I have to say. If I understand correctly, there was adopted a Waverley-wide LC whip, which included Farnham's response at the time. We're now looking at changes which Farnham want to make. Is that correct?
No, not quite. The Waverley and Farnham LC whip documents went through distinct processes run by the same team at Surrey County Council and their consultants, but they produced distinct separate documents. The Waverley one was approved, the wider Waverley one was approved by Waverley, and the Farnham one was approved by the Farnham Infrastructure Programme Board. But they were done as different documents.
So I understand. So that caused me some confusion, because as far as I'm concerned, Waverley ought to include Farnham. But we'll leave that to one side. So this is a document. Our requirement here is to review and comment on the plans for adoption of the Farnham LC whip. I guess it's a little late to be looking at the Waverley things, and that's not in this agenda pack. We're only looking at the Farnham. Yes.
No, it's the reconciliation of the two, so that the two can go together, because we either do both or we don't do either, because if we're going to have a planning policy, it has to cover the whole borough consistently.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm going to throw that now open to discussion. Who would like to go first on this? Andy, do I see your hand up? Oh, sorry, Andrew, you should have waved your hand more vigorously in front of me.
Thank you, Chairman. My understanding is, just picking up from information which I've received, that the people representing Surrey County Council on the LC whip and the Farnham LC whip were not comfortable with the proposals which were proposed here, and they're inconsistent with what the October agreement allegedly was. So there seems to be a difference of opinion as to what has appeared on this Agenda 12 document with regards to Farnham LC whip and what actually appeared and was signed off by the Surrey County Council officers in the October workshop. That's my understanding.
Sorry, I'll just sorry if I may come back on that. I'll reiterate that in fact this is additional request that has no bearing on what came out from that workshop was agreed. There is no change to that being suggested here.
I have one example where, just to give an example, where there's a cycle and road path put on the document here, which certainly wasn't agreed by Farnham LC whip, and that's just an example. If that wasn't agreed, it makes me concerned on behalf of the people who are involved that we don't seem to be all aligned.
So the process, Councillor, I mean, Councillor Cloud could correct me, but my understanding was that from the workshop wasn't about creating necessarily new routes. It was about taking the routes that are already in the LC whip and reprioritising them for the next stage, for the detailed design work. None of this affects those routes or their prioritisation in any way whatsoever.
And Andy, and then I've got Carol Coburn.
Sorry, thanks, Chairman. What I'm a bit confused about in relation to this is that there was a great deal of consultation done by the three Surrey County Councils. There was one for each north, south and central. And then we had a sort of wrap-up meeting at Waverley, Wading School, you remember, Tom. And the first I heard about any of this was reading this document, actually. So that's what surprised me. and that the Surrey County Councils have to sign this off, actually. So since the demise of the local committee, it's now up to the Surrey councillors to sign off highway matters, and this is a highway matter, in fact. And we haven't, I don't know whether this is right or wrong, to be honest. It's the first time I've seen it. Haven't been consulted on it, so I'm not quite sure what happened without actually a consultation, not just with the Farnham councillors if there's changes, but in terms of the Waverley LC whip, it would be exactly the same, that the Waverley Surrey councillors would have to sign off the LC whip, because the LC whip is very much a Surrey matter. It's not a Waverley matter, actually. Waverley are an important organisation that this is happening in Waverley, but I'm just confused as why this document has appeared out of the blue and there's been no consultation with the Surrey councils, particularly the Farnham one. Just to answer your point, Chairman, I understand you're absolutely right to say that Farnham is part of Waverley, but the reason why there's a special thing for Farnham is because the Farnham infrastructure project is such a big programme and such a big investment. It was felt appropriate to have an LC whip for the Farnham area connected with the Farnham infrastructure project. I think that was a sensible thing to do. But as I said, my fundamental point of this is that there should have been consultation, and there hasn't been. So that's my concern.
Okay, I'm going to ask Carol Kerban the next, and then I think Steve Williams has also indicated he wishes to speak. So I'll take Carol, and then I'll come to Steve, if I may. Carol?
Well, I'm quite delighted that Councillor MacLeod is as confused as I am, because I thought perhaps I hadn't been paying attention. I just don't see how we could possibly adopt this as a document that's going to inform future planning. It's not in any form for that. It's aspirational, and I'm not sure the aspirations are those of many of the Farnham residents that will be affected by this. So, you know, I don't think this document is in a form that should go ahead and inform transport statements and travel plans. And certainly with some of the measures that are included in it, it will not mitigate at all against the worsening congestion. So to me, this is premature. I just feel like Councillor MacLeod, that this needs a great deal of further consultation. You can't just put in a document with a load of aspirations and nothing to back them up, other than, you know, some people want them. And one or two things that are said in this document, for example, about making streets, you know, school streets or pedestrian-friendly streets. Farnham is gridlocked frequently. We know that. The streets are inadequate, and we hope the FIP will do something about it. When there's a long queue along West Street, thank goodness there's a route up Quandle Lane through Beavers Road and Falkland Road into the heart, and that lessens the congestion. Make that a no-go area, as it were, or a restricted area, and you've just increased the congestion in West Street. You know, there's so much in here. A bus broke down in Farnham the other day at the bottom of Downing Street, and I only realised something was going on when cars were pouring out of Upper Church Lane, which is tiny. And I thought, good Lord, what are they doing? Then I saw the broken down bus and realised that was their only loop round to stop the whole town being gridlocked again. Now, you know, all these things have to be taken into account. And I just feel when I read this, the ideas, you know, maybe some people can see, I think Councillor MacLeod, was it, who referred perhaps, or maybe it's another councillor, to these shared facilities, you know, a shared use path to try and link up with a cycle lane without, you know, really deep thought and some mitigation. It's never going to work. You can't have a family with toddlers and cycles coming along at the rate of knots. And we said all this at some of these workshops. So my argument against this is it's too early in this document's life to consider adopting it for planning purposes. It's got to go out to consultation. It's got to be honed. There's got to be some realism in it, something that people can really get behind. Because I just feel at the moment it is, as I say, it's aspirations very well meaning, but they're not necessarily going to help the congestion in Farnham. And certainly you can't just impose some of what's planned on residents without having some form of consultation. So this came as a total shock to me. You know, I hadn't had any idea that this was going to come into committee of any kind. And I agree with Councillor MacLeod. I think there's further work to be done on this. I really think adopting it tonight is totally impossible. At some point in the future, maybe, but not tonight. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Carol. Steve Williams. Steve.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's not tonight that that it will be adopted. I mean, essentially, the confusion I think that that has just been referred to by Carol is confusion that probably arises because we have to have two plans. We have to have a Waverley plan that excludes Farnham, and we have to have a Farnham plan, a Farnham LC whip that pertains to Farnham. It is actually part of the Farnham infrastructure programme. It is more than just about aspirations, it's about priorities. As I think Tom Lancaster pointed out, it's an organic document that will change over time and will develop, but we need it to go forward in order to ensure that it integrates with the emerging local plan. And it is also important that it goes forward in order to ensure that there is a basis for allocation of SIL funding for the priority of active travel, not just for Farnham, but for the entirety of Waverley. I mean, the LC whip for Farnham and the LC whip for the rest of Waverley are entirely interdependent. You cannot have one methodology for one and a different methodology for the other. And the whole purpose of this proposal is to align the methodologies for each. And so in order for us to take steps towards more sustainable and active travel, in order for us to be able to access SIL funding over the coming year to support active travel anywhere in the borough, whether it's Farnham or Godalming, Hazelmere or Cranley, we need to support this alignment and adoption of the plans. However, beyond this, certainly I would welcome any comments and feedback from this committee relating to the proposal for the two LC whips to be adopted into planning policy, because that is what we are talking about this evening.
Thank you. Now, I've got John Rubini, who I think wanted to speak, and then I'm going to come to Jerome and then back to Andy. And then I think we can begin to wind up. But John, did you want to speak?
Yes, thank you, Chairman, for allowing me to speak as a guest. I would just agree with the previous councillors. As you're well aware, I'm a Surrey County councillor for Hazelmere. I've had no indication of this at all. And if I'm to sign this off, then I need some consultation. And I would agree completely. This must be a Waverley-wide plan, surely. Otherwise, what are we doing? I connect Hazelmere to Farnham through Hindhead. I would have thought that alone would have said I should have some bearing on walkways and cycle routes. So I would like to see some proper planning for the whole of Waverley. Thank you.
Jerome.
Thank you, Chair. I go back to the recommendation for we ought to be looking at the O&S committee, is that we look at the plans and that for adoption in a wider Waverley LCWIPS into our planning policy. What I'm totally unclear of is what are the policy recommendations? They're not succinct. It's not clear to me. And I think some more work really needs to be done to clarify what is policy for Waverley to be included in our plans, not something which is just specific to Waverley independently of everybody else.
And then Andy.
Thanks, Jim. No, the idea of aligning the two plans is obviously correct. No one should dispute that. And I wouldn't dispute a lot of what Councillor Williams had just said about the importance of the LC whips and it's a way to get funding and all that sort of thing. That's all correctly true. But I just find, if you look at page 245, I find these maps very confusing. They're difficult to read exactly where they are in Farnham, actually. And they seem to suggest that things have been added. It said Bourne, Ridgeway, Lower Bourne, core walking zones added. That doesn't seem to be an aligning thing. We seem to have introduced, unless Tom can correct me, we seem to have introduced something new. And in the lower map, it talks about other things being added or dropped or realigned and so on. So it doesn't seem to be totally in line with the objective of just realigning the two methodologies. There seems to be significant changes happening here. If I'm correct, as I say, they're difficult to read, these maps, and difficult to understand them as well. But that's my concern about the whole thing, not with the objective. I don't object at all to what Tom's saying, that there needs to be alignment. And I don't object to much of what Councillor Williams saying, but I think a lot of Councillor Coburn's concerns are very valid and as well. So I think that this needs to be re-looked again before it goes to the executive with our recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
I'm going to come to Tom again in a moment, but if I can just then summarise where I think we are. We're getting a great deal of pushback from members of this committee, particularly from those people who are very closely aligned to Farnham, including county councillors. Andy's a county councillor still, and John is a county councillor, not a member of the committee. We've got significant concerns expressed from the chairman of the Services O&S Committee, who is also a Farnham councillor. I note on page 246 that following consideration of these draft proposals by this committee, the proposals will go to the executive for decision, I guess, at the next meeting or the one after that. And then I note that Surrey County Council intend then to carry out a public consultation on the prioritised infrastructure designs developed during stage 2 later in 2024. So, and then we've heard from Steve that it's pretty important that we get this aligned pretty quickly because SIL funding is important and all sorts of things will happen. If we don't get it all sorted out and into place, then we're putting the plans at risk, we're putting SIL funding at risk, and all sorts of things will happen. So we've got a pretty divided, I think, position from those who feel that this is the consideration prior to coming to this meeting has been inadequate and that it needs more. I think that's a pretty strong feeling. Tom, would you like to respond?
Well, picking up on the specifically on the point that Councillor MacLeod made about the map of the additional and slightly changed core walking zones in South Farnham, that is precisely for a methodological alignment, because the criteria that we used, number of destinations, type of destinations for core walking zones for places like Chiddingfold, Churt, Hindhead and Alfold, those would define core walking zones for Bourne Ridgeway and for Lower Bourne. They have a number of destinations so that mean that they should have, under those criteria, to use them consistently, the criteria, they should have core walking zones. But if we don't have them there, then if we have a development in those areas, we can't say you should be contributing to this core walking zone because it doesn't exist. And likewise, somebody in Chiddingfold could have a development and then say, well, you're saying there's a core walking zone here, but there isn't a core walking zone in Lower Bourne, and that's inconsistent. You've not been using the same methods. So this addition is to actually create that alignment between the Waverley method and the Farnham method.
Okay, Terry.
Thank you. I heard a lot and I sympathise with the concerns of particularly the Farnham people. I have a different problem. I come back to the wording in the recommendation. To review and comment on the plans for adoption of the Farnham and wider Waverley LC whips. I've not heard anything at all about the wider Waverley LC whips, and I don't see how we can comment on the plans if we haven't seen them. So I'm really confused. Thank you.
Well, the wider Waverley LC whip was approved. I think it was executive last January, and it went through a number of sort of stakeholder workshops. It was exactly the same process as happened in Farnham, and when it comes onto the prioritisation work, that will then lead to public consultation when we get down to the details of the priority routes. And also in terms of what Councillor MacLeod's point about these appearing out of nowhere, these issues of discrepancies were raised at executive. I think did include at least Councillor Powers was present then, back in January last year. So these discrepancies and the need to address them and what was required was all listed out at the January executive last year.
I'm going to go to Terry. Steve, I'll allow you to come back very briefly after Terry, and then I think we'll go to try and get to a decision from the committee. Terry.
I accept that this might have been decided some time ago, and I wasn't then a councillor. I had thought that was probably the explanation, but then the wording in the recommendation is incorrect. The wording should not be saying comment on the wider LC whip. It should be saying only referring to the Farnham section. Anyway, thank you. That's it.
That's a reasonable point, I think. Steve, do you want to come back very briefly?
Yeah, very briefly. Yeah, the wider Waverley LC whip has been previously approved. This is about aligning of methodologies. I think people are making it overly complex. And yes, we need to continue that discussion about the detail as the process led by Surrey County Council proceeds. But can I draw members' attention to 7.5, which states very clearly that the incremental update of the Farnham LC whip includes the following changes that align in order to align with the wider Waverley LC whip. One is the addition and expansion of the core walking zones in South Farnham need to be based on the same methodology as that of the wider Waverley, and miscellaneous minor cycle route realignments does not actually provide for major changes in what has already gone forward.
Okay, Liz, I'll allow you to speak very briefly, if you will.
Thank you. And it's only for some clarification, and I apologise if there's a little bit of confusion. And I suppose from my point of view, just to explain that that Surrey have got design codes for their healthy streets. So they've adopted, which are policy, and they are compulsory policy. So they've got the design codes. And what part of that policy is that they will look at the borough and districts LC whips as well. But Surrey have got a methodology and it's set as a code. So it isn't flexible, it is set, and they are consulting on LC whips. So what we're doing is we're creating the dovetail into something that has already been set by Surrey. And obviously, as has been said, we have already adopted previously the LC whip for Farnham. So there are some changes, and there has been a problem with the methodology used, and we've come to an agreement with Surrey and with Waverley about the methodology. And I suppose what perhaps it is for you tonight is to just looking at that methodology really, rather than actually digging into the underlying detail of the LC whip, which quite happy to have another, a briefing on that for members to understand the actual nuts and bolts of that. But the methodology is really what is being agreed, and we are dovetailing into an existing system.
Okay. Well, just before Andy speaks, I have to say, I hear what you and Steve are saying, but the document does not very well represent What you're saying,
And I
what you're
appreciate that,
saying
Chair, and
is
apologise.
remarkably straightforward, but when I look at it, I don't see that straightforwardness. I don't see what we're supposed to approve here. And there's an awfully weighty document with a lot of things in it, which are way beyond my understanding, because I don't even know most of the areas that they're talking about. So I feel very underqualified to speak about anything of the detail on Farnham. I just feel that this document has been presented to us in a very curious way. And I think it's come to the wrong committee as well, but that's a different story. Andy.
And apologies for that, Chair.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair, and allowing me to come back again. But I have to point out that public consultation was fundamental to everything we tried to do in the Farnham LC work. And we've suddenly, because of this idea of methodology having to be consistent, which is a good idea, we've suddenly, just to take one example, we've got two completely new core walking zones in Lower Bourne that haven't been consulted on. Nobody in Lower Bourne knows anything about them. I was asked if it was a good idea to have these core walking zones. And they've been implemented purely this idea that we've got to be consistent. Now, we do have to be consistent, but we can't drop the idea of public consultation and ensuring that the people of Lower Bourne want these core walking zones. And if they don't, that's a different problem. The point I'm making is that we are not just realigning here, we're introducing new things in order to realign with something else. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I'm going to stop there, I think, and I'm going to draw this together because I'm going to propose from the chair that we disagree with some of this. I know that that's not going to cause, that's going to cause Tom to be unhappy and the portfolio holders to be unhappy, but it's a clear feeling from this committee, I think, and we'll vote on it because I may have got my understanding entirely wrong. But I think the committee is unhappy that there has been inadequate consultation prior to it coming to us. Certainly that's backed up by county councillors expressing that view. I think also the report, if it is trying to do what the portfolio holders have just told us to do, it doesn't do it very well. And I don't, so I think the recommendation from this committee would be that we don't feel there's been a sufficient consultation. We don't feel that the document that's been presented to the committee enables us to take the decisions that we're being asked to take. And then as an aside, my fear is that if we do approve it, then it goes to the executive, then it goes on to Surrey County Council and say, well, Waverley are all happy with it. Their executive said yes. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee said yes. So everything is fine. We'll go out to our external consultation. But I think I realise, Councillor Townsend, you're shaking your head. You're not happy, but I'm expressing the view of the council.
No, Chair, not at all. I'm thinking you're entirely entitled to come to your view. I would just say that the points, the actual nuts and bolts, the actual details would go out to consultation. It's not that we're approving something.
I understand that, but it would go out to consultation with people saying yes, the executive of Waverley have approved it, and the Scrutiny Committee approved it, and I don't think we'd be happy to do that. So I think that we would be expressing a view to the executive that we're not happy with this report and that we would want to see more consultation, and we don't think the report represents what it says it's trying to do very well. Robin, you want to come in?
I won't add too much to it, but just to say that obviously the Scrutiny Committee is being asked to review and comment and to scrutinise en route to the executive. So all of the comments that you've made will be considered by the executive when it goes before them. So obviously, it may have been that the committee thoroughly endorsed everything, but in any event, you weren't being asked to adopt it or to approve it yourself as a committee, only to review and comment as it goes forward in the governance process. I hope that gives you some comfort. I
understand, that's reasonable, but I'm often criticised for not having recommendations and resolutions from this committee, so I'm trying to put that right. I will propose that from the chair, that we criticise the lack of consultation. We criticise the report itself as not being well framed to tell us what it's trying to do. And we would request further consultation prior to the executive decision. Would that be a reasonable view from this committee? Please, would anybody speak against that? Because I don't want to misrepresent anybody. Feel free to object or change. Steve, you're not a member of the committee. I'm asking the committee. At the
No,
moment, but-
I'm just asking for a question of clarification. What kind of consultation is being sought by the committee? Because that needs to be clear in order to be able to respond.
Well, councillors don't seem, Surrey County councillors don't seem, from the area, don't seem to have been to know about it. Has it been to Farnham Town Council? What have they said? Okay, so because that's a no. So I think, okay, that's my proposal. Would that be reasonable? And is everybody in agreement with that? Are there any people who are opposed to that view? Okay, well, that seems to be a unanimous view of the committee. Jake, have you got sufficient there to put a sort of a recommendation? I don't in any way wish to be destructive, and it sounds if we have been, but there is a general feeling from this committee that they're pretty unhappy with the way it's been done, and I think that's important that that's put across. Okay, are we content to move on that, to complete on that, I should say? Fine, let's move on then, if we may. To the next item.
We have Councillor Williams speak on this.
Yeah, okay. We come now to what is agenda item 13. I think, have I got this right? Yes. With my complicated change of things. Yes. So that's, yes, it is. Right. Okay, so this is the Carbon Neutrality Action Plan Priority Projects. And I think we have, who is going to speak to this? Have we got, we've got Delma, is that right? Delma, you're going to speak, and I think that I have no doubt that Councillor Williams will wish to say something as well. It would be very difficult to stop him, I guess. Delma, would you like to introduce this? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So as you can imagine, there's not many years now till 2030. So we want to obviously maximise the amount of time we have left to reduce our emissions. So we want to introduce some priority projects into our Carbon Neutrality Action Plan update in the summer. And this is what this paper is. It also recognises that some of the projects might not be able to be completed by 2030. There's two projects which may not, one of which is social housing and the other one is possibly the waste contract. And that's more to do with the timing than anything else. So the other thing we wanted to do is to put some responsibility on the officers who are looking at these projects to identify how they're going to reduce their emissions in the next few years and sort of come up with the what needs to be done, the amount of emissions in a stepped process to make it clear, and also for us to start being able to see what amount of offsetting we'll need to do. And the example, which is the appendix, is just an example of how it could look. It's not necessarily how it will look, it's just an example.
Okay, thank you. Steve, should I bring you in now, or would you like to address us?
Yeah, only very briefly at this stage, really just to emphasise that this is about prioritisation in terms of our own carbon neutrality trajectory as a council, in terms of our commitment to secure carbon neutrality by 2030. What we are seeking to do is to identify those actions which will actually have the greatest impact in the most effective way. The actions that are highlighted and that you can see in the spreadsheet that comes with the papers together comprise 93% of our carbon emissions as a borough council, and therefore it makes sense, whatever else we might be doing in terms of active travel and so on, which is not about our direct impact, in terms of the direct impact of what the council is doing on a day-to-day basis. These 9 items are the key priorities, because without getting them on a net zero trajectory, we will not be successful in terms of our goals. So it's about prioritisation, bluntly.
Could I just pick you up on one point? You mentioned that's 93% of our own areas of responsibility, but you've excluded social housing from that statement, yes?
Yes, social housing was always treated separately within our carbon neutrality action plan.
Okay, thank you. Right, questions, comments, members of the committee? Okay, maybe I can start by saying firstly that I do welcome the annex with the 9 areas, the 9 project areas, which I find very interesting, and I entirely understand why they've been placed in that list of priorities. I note with interest that on that page, I'm looking at page 443, there are a lot of grant-funded items. If I add them all together, I think it looks as if we get £2 million worth of grant fundings, or we hope to, of putting in bidding. Could I just understand where that funding comes from? To whom are we bidding? Is that government, various government departments, or is that one place, several places? What is that? That's question number 1. Question number 2 that I have is really going to page 437 in our report and paragraph 7.4. This does go on to the decarbonisation of our social housing properties. And you put a priority. I have to say, when the debate was first had way back in 2019, I really couldn't see how anything was going to happen by 2030 regarding social housing. And indeed, I don't suppose it will be. And the revised date must go well beyond 2030 for that. You mention a decarbonisation plan, and you're saying, as far as I can see, that putting the plan together would cost in the region of £100 million. That includes the Social Housing Decarbonisation Fund. Could I get clarity on that? That seems to be a very expensive plan, if that's the case. Then I go to paragraph 10.2, where the financial implications are spoken of. When it comes to social housing, at the top of page 439, the sentence there says that costs would run into hundreds of millions, and this would not be possible by the current 2030 target, even assuming some government funding. So we have no indication of just how much it will cost in social housing change. And I do note the changes, what we're doing with 7 or 8 houses in Oxford Ridge. Just wondered where we are with that, and bringing those to a high level is costing us hundreds of thousands of pounds each for each house. So just where are we going on that? And my final question is really to say that it does seem to me that we've really abandoned 2030 as our goal. I mean, it's no longer a goal that we can reach. We're not going to be carbon negative by 2013. Is that a reasonable statement or not? Thank you.
In response to your first question about the funding, most of the funding we're looking at is government funding. We've just made a bid for the Public Sector Decarbonisation Fund bid. That is the one for Farnham Leisure Centre. We've also made social housing bid as well. So those are 2 government funded bids. We will go for any funding that we can find, but most of the ones we're looking at, the big money ones, are government funded.
But what is that £100 million that you talk about as being the decarbonisation plan? What's that going to be used for? What is that going to?
No, so that is a misunderstanding, and I apologise. I will check the wording on that. When the asset plan was done originally a number of years ago, they estimated it would cost about £100 million for the decarbonisation of the social housing, and that's where the figures come from. It's not the plan. So we'll.
Tell me, you seriously are telling me that a few years ago we were saying that it would cost about £20,000 per property to bring it up to the levels that we need? Is that what was discussed at that time?
I can't comment on that. I wasn't part of that actual. It's in the asset plan, which is where it's come from, that figure.
Yeah, so I would say from a finance point of view, we don't have a firm idea of how much it would cost. I've estimated in the hundreds of millions, but at this stage we wouldn't know. I think the team are doing a lot of work with their stock surveys. I think once we have that data, that information needs to feed in order for us to give a realistic estimate. I suspect when we said 20,000, our stock data wasn't up to date. But I wasn't around when 100 million was quoted for all of our stock. But obviously our stock is in various states. We have a number of houses that are in a very good condition and a number that aren't. But I estimated in my finance comment hundreds of millions because it is quite unknown.
Well, I think that's a bit of an underestimate, I have to say. Comment on the 2030 goal. It's really, that's just an aspiration. It's no look, but we're nowhere near getting that to that, are we? Steve, you want to reply to that?
Yeah, I'd just really like to remind people of the motion that was passed in 2019. There were two elements to it. One was an aim to become carbon neutral by 2030, taking into account both production and consumption emissions, and taking a leadership role within the community and with other councils. The second element of it, and I quote, recognises that the achievement of the target will require central government to provide the powers, funding and other resources to achieve the target, and therefore calls on the government to provide such powers, funding and other resources as appropriate to facilitate achieving the 2030 target. Now, it's very clear that what our actions within the carbon neutrality action plan comprise not just the delivery element, but enabling and facilitating, supporting and encouraging, and lobbying. And we have lobbied and lobbied and lobbied, for example, for the government to set an objective of EPC A as a target for 2030, rather than EPC C for our housing stock. And we have lobbied and lobbied for support for councils like ours with carefully costed and well-developed action plans for carbon neutrality. And we have constantly been rebuffed in that, and so has the cross-party group of members of Parliament that have sought to be able to support councils like this with a clear plan. So we are constrained in terms of what we can do, and therefore we need to prioritise, and that is what this is about. But I tell you one thing, Mr. Chair, we will not stop lobbying.
Thank you, Steve. Well, I think the point that I made at the time of the 2019 debate was that it was hugely aspirational and out of line with government commitments of 2050 and Surrey County Council's targets of 2050. So 2030 was always going to be a risk, and I could see no way, and I can still see no way, that we can get anywhere near 2030 with our social housing. Okay, are there any other comments that anybody wants to make? Andy?
443, which summarises everything really. In the funding section, there's quite a lot of green which we're applying for, a couple of orange which currently being installed. I can't read the thing in red actually, because maybe I need new glasses or something. I just wondered what the red colour meant and what it actually says in that section. Because it would normally be something that's
It says that a workshop is to be arranged for September 2023, which is interesting because that's already gone, with main housing contractor to discuss more responsive planned works with geographic grouping and first-time lines. We'll also discuss transition to EVs. That's what it says.
Okay, well, thank you for that. So it's not an indication of something that's bad. Okay.
The red stands for not deliverable within current timescales. So that's why there's a past date on there. Yeah, so it's as you would expect.
Yeah, I mean, I am very supportive of what Councillor Williams is saying, and I think we should be doing the sort of thing he expresses. but there is an awful lot of things that we're going to have to apply for funding, which implies quite a lot of work, and we won't necessarily get it. So that does potentially jeopardise our objective of achieving what we want to achieve by 2030. Yeah.
Well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I think that the committee would probably be happy to say that it broadly welcomes greater clarity regarding the projects to take us towards decarbonisation. Would that be a reasonable comment? I think I would also like to see more details on decarbonisation plans for our social housing, because that's the biggest single area that we have. I think it would be reasonable to ask for that to be given a greater priority as we go forward. Would anybody like to add anything else to that? Okay, so if we leave that, I think we've already made some comments. Councillor Williams, I hope you can take note of those.
Thank you. Yeah, noted.
Okay.
Sorry, on that note, shall I take those as general comments? Or
yes, are we happy to accept those as comments? Terry?
Not on the substance of the proposal, which I support, but again, a technical comment, similar to the problem with the reading the red. I have a real problem with page 443 and 45, the big banner across the top. We have small fonts on a green background, and I just can't read it. These are headings. I need to know what the headings are, and I can't read them. Can we please have more care in choosing choice of colours for our papers, please?
We'll take that. We can note that. Thank you. Thank you. Let's move on to our next item then, which is the Committee Forward Work Programme. What I suggest that we do on this, the next meeting of this committee is not until sometime in April. Is it the next meeting? June. Oh, sorry, it's June. It's further. Yes, it is a long way away. I think it's kind of difficult for us to sort of plan now. There is one thing on the page 449. There is one outstanding item, which is 69 High Street, Godalming. You'll recall that in our September meeting, we spoke about 69 High Street, and we said that we would like to see lessons learned for the future. We haven't done anything about that. I would propose that perhaps the deputy, the chairman, and myself look at that and come back to this committee with some sort of recommendation. Would the members be happy if we did that? If we brought that to the next meeting? Okay, so let's handle that in that way, if we may. And there are items going forward. If you look on page 451, we've dealt with most of the items on that page. And then there are lots of items that are coming forward. But I think at this stage, putting those confidently onto the next meeting agenda will be a bit premature. So I'm going to propose that you leave that to the Deputy Chairman and myself. And if anybody wants to specifically add something, could you please let us know? Would that be, Andrew, are you happy with that? Or members happy with that? Rather than trying to go into any detailed debate now. Okay, fine, thank you. Let's leave it at that. Okay. Let us now move on to Brightwells. This is something which has already been agreed by the executive. I was consulted on this because of a swift decision that was needed, and I did agree to the proposal to change the long stop date. So we are looking at this in retrospect, and we need to understand that. Who is going to propose this or speak to us? Debbie, is it? You're going to give us the an update on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello. Yes, as you say, the paper you had before you did go to the executive a couple of weeks ago. So I would welcome any feedback on that or if any questions. I also did say to Chair I could do a quick update on the scheme. I can show you a 2-minute time-lapse video if you'd like to see that. I'm conscious of time, but it's a couple of minutes if you'd like to see that, and I could just talk through where the development is at the moment.
Lot to do. Do members want to see that? No, I think we're probably going to
send the link round.
If you could send a link, that would be fascinating to watch. But I think in the interest of time, Debbie, we won't do that.
Okay. So otherwise, the scheme is largely complete on site, save for a couple of key items that the commercial tenants and ourselves are largely interested in is the East Street works, which are kind of due to coming for a planning application soon, and also the bridge works. Otherwise, most units are ready for fit out, and indeed the cinema is already open and trading. The car park is nearly ready, as is most of the residential homes. So there's a number of residents on site. About over a third of the flats are already occupied and on site, and the remaining homes will come forward in the summer. That's it, really. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Andrew?
What is the percentage of retail units taken up so far? Do you have any information on that?
I mean, in terms of, we're obviously kind of open session, there are some names that are already out there in the public, which the big name at the moment is on Brightwise House is Copper Club, and there are a couple of other units that have applied for planning applications, such as a gym and an estate agent. However, there are other people, in solicitors' hands, etc., etc.
No, sorry, I understand it can't be discussed.
Andy?
Thank you. Just to speak in support of this proposal, the Brightwells project is a very important project for Farnham. It's taken an awful long time to come to fruition, but it's nearly there now. And it's very, very sensible to amend the long stop date just so it can be properly finished without any legal problems. It would be very silly not to do this. So that's my comment, Chairman. Thank you.
Lauren?
I had a question that I emailed.
Do you want to just ask that?
Okay, sure. I just wondered if there were any liquidated damages applicable for this delay.
Not in the financial sense of the development agreement, but I can talk to you separately about the other kind of implications that we have with the delay in relation to some of the deals that we do have with Crest, but I can't say those right now in this session.
Okay.
Okay.
I think my feeling on this was that very much in line with Councillor MacLeod, that this has gone on for a very long time, and by extending, we wanted to detach the bridge work from the completion date. That was a key thing, because we didn't want the bridge to delay the opening of the rest of it, and also moving the long stop date seemed to be sensible and practical. This is a project which has now taken something like 20 years. So my feeling was a delay of a few more months was not going to be particularly sensitive. And at least it seems to me to give us the view that it's not far away from completion. Completion is now in view, clearly in view. And for me, that was something to be welcomed. So I would propose that there are exempt papers with this. I don't feel a need to go into any detail on those. I would propose that we note and agree the executive decision. Are we all in agreement on that? Okay, fine. Thank you. That then leads us on to the fairground item. Now, the reason that I've put these onto the agenda where I have is that what I would like to do is to discuss item 12 and then item 13. Of course, they are two things which are linked. And I would want to do as much as possible of our discussion in open session. But I'm very conscious of the fact that there are substantive pink pages, exempt papers, which we almost certainly will want to discuss in greater detail. So we will need to ensure that while we're in open session, we don't discuss the exempt items, and we'll discuss those at a later point. But let's have as much discussion as we reasonably can on each of these items. So when we've got those two, when we've discussed them in open session, I will then go and ask for the exclusion of public and press and go into exempt session. Is that fairly clear? Is everybody happy with that? So let's then start with the Fairground car park development project. Debbie, I think this is for you to introduce, or?
I'm going to kick off if that's
That'd
okay,
be-
Chair.
okay, fine,
And
thank
I'm
you.
going to share a PowerPoint presentation quickly, which will we can cover in open session. So
Okay,
bear
thank
with me
you.
2 seconds. I wonder as well if we might take the liberty of we've got a couple of slides which relate to the the Wadham Road car park site, and I wonder if we can cover that within this presentation as well. Would that
Yes,
be okay?
I'm pretty happy that we should probably take the two things together because
Yep.
they're intimately linked, even though they're two separate items. So, yes, thank you.
Great. Okay, hopefully that's sharing properly. Okay, great. So we'll just talk through these slides initially to give a bit of context to the context of the scheme. So the first item we're going to cover is the fairground development site. So just to give you a bit of background context to this, in executive approved in March 2022 the approval of funds to complete a feasibility work on the general fund asset at the fairground site, and then a subsequent report was then brought forward to executive in October 2022, which noted the feasibility study and agreed for progression to the next phase. The outputs of those feasibility work is captured within the appendices, appendix of the business case. For context, but just more broadly in terms of the project description, so the site is currently within Waverley's ownership in Hazelmere. I think most members are aware of the site, but essentially what we are looking to bring forward is a mixed-use housing and commercial scheme, which is in alignment with the local plan allocation. In doing so, to increase the number of affordable homes in Hazelmere, recognising that it's a key settlement area, and there is substantial demand from a housing needs element, and then thirdly, ultimately to deliver a long-term commercial income to the authority, along with the benefits that arise from that in terms of employment. In terms of site context, it's a bit of a jigsaw site. So there's 3 sites. To the north of the Wayhill, you've got the Wadham Road car park site, which is currently a pay and display car park. To the west of that, then you've got the youth campus and the woodyard. And then to the southwest, on the other side of Wayhill Road, you have the youth campus and the youth hub and fairground car park site. And the fairground car park site is currently used for informal car parking. There is no car charging currently liable on the site. So just to recap really, and I won't labour this because it's been on the previous slides, but I think it's quite important context really in terms of what the scheme is seeking to achieve. Wait me 1 second, get rid of that. So it's around the delivery of new housing, as I say, which the council will retain within the housing revenue account. It's around delivering commercial development with a long-term lease. Alongside this, we're cognizant of the fact that the car parking, that the site on the fairground is currently used for car parking, and which benefits local shops, premises within the vicinity. So the proposals recognise that there needs to be an element of that retained to ensure that the existing business continues to be provided for. And then finally, as it says there, it's about delivering a scheme that meets the project objectives for housing and also commercial occupation alongside it. Louisa, I think you're up next.
Louisa, can you?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So as Abby's indicated, the economic case for the project has been pulled together, and flowing from this, options were developed, and these are set out on the screen here. This is for, it falls under three main options really. Options A, B and E provide retail retained by Waverley General Fund and homes maintained and owned by Waverley Borough Council, with different rent modelling as part of the mix. And then option C is retail and Waverley homes that are for rent retained by the council, but then 6 shared ownership homes disposed of to a registered provider. And the final option, option D, was the retail retained by Waverley and then the housing sold off as a private development with a minimum affordable provision of 30% affordable housing as prescribed through planning. financial impact of each of these options are summarised in Annex 3, which Candice can talk to.
I can lightly talk to you because so much of it is in exempt. So I'll just talk a bit about the processes that we followed. A lot of them are what you're used to seeing in terms of assessing the revenue impact. I've also provided a Q&A document which goes more into the balance sheet impact, which members have flagged before, and the book value of our current sites as well. So we've looked at ongoing revenue impacts for 50 and 60 years on these different options. And after we've completed all our assessments, everything has been ranked based on different weightings, including how much affordable housing that it delivers. And after we've gone through all that and looked at all the finances, we have recommended option A based on both the financials and how it delivers affordable housing. But further questions in terms of specific financials would need to be an exempt.
Thank you. Before I throw it open to questions and comments. Oh, sorry.
Sorry, Chair. We've got a couple more slides to go, if that's okay. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. So just in terms of delivery, the approach that we're taking is to undertake a procurement exercise to secure a third-party delivery partner. So they will perform two functions. So they will build out an agreed scheme, including securing the planning consents, carrying out public consultation, actually construction fit out, and any associated planning obligations that sit with it. And in doing so, they'll deliver kind of the objectives that the council sets in terms of the quality of design and incorporating the requirements around employers' requirements for the housing stock. So that's generally what the approach would be. And I think it's really important to identify that we're not out there to procure a contractor. We're there to procure a development partner who will work with us through the process. And I think, John, you're going to touch on what that looks like.
Thank you. So I think. Thank you.
Just to clarify, John, you're a Montague Evans consultant working for us, yes?
That's right, yeah. And I'm helping a number of local authorities actually with similar projects to this deliver sort of procurement of mixed-use developments. I think I won't dwell too much on these because I know you've got a lot of questions, but your officers, I think, have very eloquently set out the aspirations for this site and your objectives that you're trying to deliver from it. And it's our job really to help translate those into the best methods for delivery and set up that sort of sliding scale there, just to really give an indication of the wider processes which we've considered here. And I would say generally, the more control that the council would like on the direction and what's actually delivered on the site, the higher the risk it is taking in that process. And the sort of lowest risk element of there would just be a straight sale of the site, but it obviously has no control then, or not very little control really in terms of what is actually delivered on that site in the future. The next range up is in putting a development agreement together with a developer. That is a contract, a bit like a sort of conditional sale contract really, where once those conditions are satisfied, then the site is transferred to the development partner. Really, and then the third is the development management and funding arrangement. And in here, where we've got an objective where the council wants to retain the income from the site once it's completed, that really feels like one of the best to proceed with in this instance. And the final option really is the council acting as developer itself, which puts it very highly up the risk curve and has a lot of resource implications that sit with that. So I've got one more slide, and that looks at the process itself. So as the council are, in this instance, procuring works, then it will go through an open procurement process to actually secure the partner to come through. Whilst we may have exited Europe, a lot of the procurement rules that sit there still are in place. So we will have to follow these to make sure that we get the most economically advantageous bid to the council, but also that it's a transparent process as well. I won't dwell on all of the elements there. I just have to say that CD is competitive dialogue, and that allows a dialogue with the development partner throughout the course of the procurement process and beyond that process as well. And that was thought to offer the best flexibility for this project and the site that we're looking to deliver. On the sort of competitive dialogue process, just a little bit about the sort of overall timetable for this. This is an indicative timetable, assuming that the council wish to proceed. We really start the procurement process with a launch of the project in April, and then we have around about a sort of 12-month process in total to actually secure the development partner, through which there would be a regular round of negotiation and down selection of the potential parties who would be supporting the council.
Brilliant. And then just to follow on, the fairground development, as you saw from the map previously, has the current community youth hub, or the youth hub building on the site. And in order for the project to work, we really need that the parcel of land to actually be part of the development. So back in October 22, we brought forward a proposal to have a feasibility study done on finding a suitable site for that youth hub provision. And we looked at a number of sites which are detailed in the business case as the stage 1 options, and whittled that down to 3 sites. And that has brought us out to a development on the way down road car park. So in the business case, there are 3 viable options which we set out, which I'm sure you can see from your papers. And there's also one that's not highlighted so well, but is in the business cases. We did look at whether we could increase the provision of parking there as well, but that is not viable. So just in terms of next steps, we're asking for the next stage of development to go to try and get a planning application together, to make some more investigations on the site, to do some engagement, or some more engagement and consultation. But one of those first things we'll be doing is to do some more assessment on the car park usage on both sites and around, so not just our car parks but other car parks in the area, and make an assessment how that might affect any development on the planned way down road car park. And that will also link into any on-street car parking issues as well. And so, subject to the outcome of that study, we'll be looking to work up a planning permission in line with the recommended option, which is that larger kind of youth hub. And just to tie in with John's timelines around the fairground procurement, I think obviously the enabling project is to enable the fairground project, but we need to make sure that it aligns well with the fairground project itself, so that we are not going ahead with something that we don't have the right permission and the right costing for. So what that means essentially is that we are looking to come through to council for the overall cost, or which is outline business case cost for the development project, both projects at the same time, and within the year we will do the process for fairground that we've outlined on the competitive dialogue, but also look at whether we can achieve a planning permission on the way down road site. Once if we're successful with that, we'll then spend some time bidding for other resources such as SIL, and then look to contract at the same kind of time, once we've been able to come back to council again in a year's time, basically having completed those 2 pieces of work. That's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, Debbie, thank you very much. Before I throw it open to questions and comments, I would just like to try and ensure that we know what we're doing here. If you turn to page 90, you see there in paragraph 2 the recommendations to overview and scrutiny. 2.1 says it's recommended that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee Resources considers the report and makes any recommendations to the Executive as appropriate, noting the following recommendations for Executive and Council. that subject to there being a full council approval of a budget of £21.4 million. So that will come to full council on, I think, the 23rd of April. And it will go to the executive on the 9th of April, so that's well in time. So subject to that, then, and also they want to look at going with option A as set out in the business case for the fairground development project. Then there are a number of other delegations that the executive are then proposing really the next step, which is to approve £328,000 worth of proposed budget, of which 280 is new and 48 is carried forward, as in 2.21 and 2.2.2. So we're being asked to look at that. I should point out that there is an all-member briefing on the 16th of April. So this is a chance for us to look at it now. It goes to the executive, I think, on the 9th of April. It goes to the all-member briefing on the 16th, and it comes to full council on the 23rd. We then have to link it to agenda item 2, which is the Way Down Road Community Hub Development Project. And if you look at page 174, again there, the fairground project is an enabling thing. This won't go ahead if the fairground project falls for any reason. Then there is absolutely no way in which the Way Down Road Community Hub Development Project goes ahead. But assuming the one does take place, then what follows is, as we've seen, the youth club project, and in the early stages of the executive and the council will be asking for a budget of 223,000 or nearly 224,000, as in 2.2.1, which is what is being proposed that we spend our money on. That's the proposal that we will have to look at. So I just wanted that by way of clarification as to the timetable and who's deciding what and how much money. I hope that helps. Right, questions and comments. Who would like to lead off? I understand you've got to leave relatively early, so this will be your opportunity.
Sure. I mean, a lot of my questions are contained within the pink papers, so I will keep away from that as much as possible. So my first question is really around the decision for option 1 and whether any massing studies have been undertaken so that we can understand whether we are actually maximising the value that's on the site. So without mentioning items in the pink papers, I did notice that the allocation was different between 2 dates. And we are looking to do something which is on the lower end of that. So therefore, I am interested to understand why that changed, and also whether gentleman from Montague Evans has put together a massing study that perhaps we could look at. I've got loads of questions, but that's the first one.
So through, how do you want to respond, Debbie?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's tricky. I think in terms of the local plan Part 2 allocations, there's 20 as a minimum. I think the feedback that we've had when we spoke to the when we've spoken to people with that we absolutely want to maximise the opportunity on the site, whether for housing and density, and we will do that. We have had some initial studies completed which show 32 as an option, and that's what we've done our business case profile on. It doesn't mean that that's what it will be at all. It's just that first stage to get through. Is that?
If I can add to that, yeah. So we've had an architectural team on board who have done kind of comprehensive work looking at different configuration across the site, thinking about some of the constraints that there are. So you've got the railway line to the rear of the site. You've got the a number of key kind of trees that are much loved as I understand it in the area. So that massing study has been completed and considered as we've moved forward.
Thank you. The next key area for me really is the decision on why a 20,000 square foot unit on the ground floor, because obviously if it was not possible to secure the type of tenant that you are suggesting, then that is a huge risk. And I don't believe that anything should be entered into unless you had someone to take that. And what's the view in terms of the demand for that based on the changes and especially the time period between when that kind of was mooted and now?
Debbie?
I just,
Abby?
just wanted to Chair, there's quite a bit that we could add to this discussion if it were not in open session, just in terms of the market engagement that we've had. And I think John from Montague could talk quite well to that.
Okay, but I mean, you do mention the fact that, we've got some feedback. You do mention in the open papers a supermarket potential. And I think the intent is that the supermarket would have housing above, as I understand it. We're not talking about standalone units quite separate from the retail element. So is that not a sort of slightly dangerous area to be? Is that likely to be attractive to a supermarket, for instance?
Thank you. Yes, I mean, we've regularly engaged with the market in terms of interest in this site, and the designs have sought to accommodate that interest. And we're very confident that those parties would be very interested in this site and this project, and all the arrangements would be conditional upon them signing up before anything proceeded. So we would really seek to take out any risk from an occupational perspective to the council in the arrangements that we're talking about for the procurement.
So, through the chair. So are you saying then that before you actually even started on site, you would ensure that you had that tenant signed up? Because that hasn't happened, has it, in Godalming? When, I don't know whether you were involved in that, but...
Reference to 69 High Street.
Absolutely. So in this instance, then there would be no commencement on site prior to the occupier being signed up, and I would fully anticipate that before any of the development arrangements were signed up with the development partner, that the occupier was secured as well.
Through the chair. Because one of my biggest concerns, and I won't mention the values in the pink papers, but I'm concerned that the value mentioned for the retail was quite high, but obviously with no tenant, it's very low. And the residential element was half of that. But it seems to me that that number is half of the number that is in the open papers. And to me, it doesn't stack up. So I don't want to take over this meeting because I've got a huge amount of questions, which I did put back in an email. But a comment was made earlier that not enough recommendations are brought to overview and scrutiny. And as always, with my comments on these sorts of projects, my recommendation would be a 1A. And the 1A would be that you bring to council that massing exercise and you help us understand the rationale for why you think that option 1 is really the best option. And my other recommendation would be that potentially 2 planning applications are put through the council. 1, perhaps if you decide that 1A is correct, but 2, perhaps something that would really maximise the site that is different. And then off the back of those 2 planning applications, then all of these options could be assessed again, i.e. going out to market to see the value that you could actually get on that site. And then you're keeping your options open. Because it doesn't seem to stack up to me. That's it.
Thank you. I mean, we won't talk about the survivability of the project itself, but under the arrangements we're talking about, the planning application and all the work leading up to the planning application will be undertaken by the development partner rather than the council. The objectives would be set within the contract papers, which would be part of which would be to sort of maximise value, but part of it would also be to deliver the other objectives which the council have for this site. So you've got an opportunity to be part of that discussion and also to sort of maximise the value as it goes through, but you're passing a lot of the risk to the market to deliver in terms of its expertise for maximising value out of the site.
I have one final question, if that's okay. Please, can you explain to me exactly what a third-party development partner is? Because you've said it's not a builder. That particular organisation would be putting this through planning, but you're still, as a Waverley Borough Council, are retaining control. So can you, probably for the benefit of everyone, specifically explain what that really is?
Well, there'll be the competition material which will go out will have certain criteria in terms of the type of partner who would be accepted by the council. I think most likely in this instance you're going to find yourself with a developer, and that's someone who would then bring in the contractor to build. It may also be the ultimate occupier here who actually acts as developer on this project, and they might be able to deliver it for a better value approach. So all of that would be open through the competition, and they would have to prove that they had the sort of skill and resource to be able to bring the project forward, and also that they were having an approach which was collaborative and really did respect the requirements of the council.
Laurel, I'm going to call a halt there for you because I think you've had a fair crack of the whip. Let me go to Terry. I know that Councillor Merriweather wants to come in as well, but I want to give up an opportunity for members of the committee to speak first. So, Terry, then come to Peter.
Thank you. I want to come in with a fairly simple question that I did put through in an email a lot earlier, and that is, all these options include a retail component. My question is, was there any consideration to a proposal without retail? And that is two reasons for that, or two factors in my thinking behind that. First of all, if we already own the site, is it really necessary to have a commercial component to justify and make it worthwhile? And secondly, if we must have retail, has there been an investigation on the likely impact of that retail on existing retail down Way Hill? Thank you.
Go to Peter and then take all the answers in one go. So, Peter.
Yes, that's actually a comment, not a question, but I'll continue. And this is very much a brownfield site with free car parking allowed for commuters mainly, but also shoppers and local workers, and that will be discussed at the next point as we go along. There really is a twofold advantage to this. So it secures a sizable commercial tenant and 32 homes for rent. And of course, that is an important part of the local plan. This is a key part of the local plan. Looking at the size of this, I think this is going to take up the bulk of the site. I think there's very little extra space would be available. I think it's just worthwhile to continue to proceed to the next steps on this one. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments before I go back to officers from members of the committee? Okay, officers, and then I'll come to Councillor Merriweather.
If I may, I think the premise of what the council's trying to deliver here is in accordance with the local plan allocation, which is for mixed use development. So I think that's the underlying principle of what we've looked at, and compliance with that means that it includes a commercial element along with retail. Along with housing element. I think that in terms of the impact on the local existing business population, we haven't done any survey work on that, although we are acutely aware of that, the importance that the car park site at the moment plays in relation to visitors and custodians to the local business premises. So one of the requirements that we would look to bring out in terms of our requirements through the development process would be an assurance that there was an element of parking on the site that could be used for local businesses to ensure that they're not adversely impacted by the development. I think what we'd looked at previously was kind of trying to maximise the car parking on the site, both for a future tenant along with current users.
An answer to whether it should all be housing? Why does it have to include a retail unit element?
So we have modelled it as an all housing option. For the HRA, it's good. It improves the numbers that you'll see in Annex 3. But for the general fund, obviously, this is one of their sites. And we do have to look at what would benefit the general fund as well. So at the moment, based on book value that I put into those Q&As would be all that the HRA would have to pay for that general fund element, which is quite unfair to the general fund. And it would be better for the general fund just to pave it and sell it as a car park, in terms of the general funds. We've had to look at how it impacts both sides of the equations in terms of financials. And as I said, in the local plan, it is as a mixed use scheme, which is why we've carried on looking at it that way. Yeah.
Right, Councillor Merriweather, do you want to come in?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to just pick up on that. The anchor for this is the local plan part 2. And this is for Fairground, it's a mixed-use development on an allocated site. But part of this process will also help unlock another allocated site, which is the youth campus. So it's very important for the delivery, for the credibility of our local plan and the huge amount of work that's gone in, not just to these papers, but the amount of work that went into the local plan itself. And I encourage everybody to read that. And for this site, for Fairground and also for the youth campus, consideration was given not only to it being a mixed-use development, but also to the provision of car parking. So the local plan allocation was not just about the mixed use on Fairground, but it was conditional on certain criteria being respected in terms of car parking. I'd also just like to stress, to re-emphasize that this is, sorry for the misquote here, but this isn't even really the beginning of the end. This is maybe a middle part of the beginning. What we're doing here is we are setting an envelope under which, or within which, a lot of the further work that's needed to answer so many of these questions will be done. And that includes the budget envelope. It's not a commitment or a binding commitment to spend the money. It just sets the boundaries within which the next phase of work will be done. Again, I don't want to reopen all the discussions we've had about value, but when we talk about value, we don't just talk about monetary value, we talk about social value. And at the same time as members are reading the local plan, I would encourage them to read the government's Green Book and the guidance on value for money, which explains how that works. Thank you.
Thank you. And I would just point out that although this is talking about a £21.4 million budget, I do note that a further report will be needed to be brought back to the Council and the Executive and presumably to this committee before the award of a contract for a development partner. Could I have assurance that will come to the scrutiny committee, but that particular point? Okay, I'm getting nods from the officers, so that's an important point to note. Okay. Can we just briefly discuss the Waydown Road Community Hub Development Project? I assume that the committee would be pretty much in favour of that. That's a fairly straightforward thing. We would not wish to see the loss of the youth club, the hub, that would come again. Jerome?
Well, I think you raise a nice point there. Assuming that we do not proceed, or we recommend that we do not proceed with the fairground car park development and the associated community hub, what happens to the community hub? It exists now as I believe, a Waverley asset site. It is in increasingly dilapidated condition. So what are the implications if we do not proceed with this particular project?
probably unthinkable, but
Interesting to hear what the officers think.
Yeah, from an asset point of view, the hub is definitely at the end of its life. So we would need to come up with another solution.
If I may, but there's no alternative solution in the wings.
Not currently, no.
Thank you.
I think that's an assurance that there's no plan B. But I think what I was trying to get to is before we go into exempt session, I want to ensure that everybody is happy that there is a new youth community hub which will be built. I mean, is that conceptually, whether you agree with the amounts of money involved, are we all pretty happy with that as a proposition? So I think in open session, that's a fairly straightforward thing, but we would all want to see that. Okay, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, I think that probably we need now to go into exempt session. Are we all agreed with that? I will need to read the relevant documentation, sadly, which is the recommendation that pursuant to Procedure Rule 20 and in accordance with Section 100A4 of the Local Government Act 1972, we agree, one, that the public be excluded from the meeting during consideration of the following matter on the grounds it's likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during the item, there will be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined by the Act. And two, that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Are we all agreed that that is the case? Okay, can we therefore close down? And before we then proceed, can I suggest that we have a 2-minute comfort break?